Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. First of all, happy Easter. Seems like slightly odd celebrating with everything else that's going on, but I'm going to celebrate by making the most of the next few days in this garden. Hopefully we have some lovely weather and I can enjoy it. I've been busy working my way down this border. I was mulching last week and there's been a problem. It's still really wet and I got to places where there was no point mulching. I just needed to turn the soil, let the air and the weather get into it, dry it out, and I think it will do it the world of good. But it's amazing, even with all that water, peonies were pushing up through it. The euphorbias are coming on, the thalictrums are coming on. You know, nature really just wants to keep going. And I've been tidying through the back here, because this is a little bit drier, and came across this lot, which are all Angelicas, and they're a biennial, so what they do is they complete their cycle in 2 years. Once they've flowered the second year, they die. And last year we had some big ones at the back here. They've flowered, they've seeded, and this is what I've got from those seeds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin it out, take them to different places in the garden. I might even pot some up, but they will definitely come in handy. Hello, Ash. All right, mate. You can help with this. On today's programme, Francis revels in an orchard full of damson blossom. And Carol finds wonder in the humble primrose. So the gravel garden, it's an area at the front of the house that we really enjoy through the summer months. It bakes out here. I'm just coming here really to a couple of little jobs that I want. Hello, young man. Oh, there you go. Try and pay attention. No, he's gone. It's all right. We're fine. This Santolina, I think, has had it, but I am just going to go and do a check. Go down the stem and just scrape. And if you get in there and then there's brown, it's gone. And yeah, there's not a lot of life in there. Also, there's a lot of movement, which means the root system is not great either. So I'm just going to tease this out. Some of these plants are not the longest lived, but also I think maybe just a wet winter. So tidy that up and get something in there over the weekend. The other thing I want to do is over here, I had a big lemon verbena and it was filling up the space, so I've taken it out, put it somewhere else in the garden, but I still want to fill the space with something. I don't want to just leave it because you've got this strong vertical, and I think it's that I'm going to take the lead off. And I've chosen these Korean mint. It'll grow to about 1 metre, lovely spike flowers. These will be white, but you can get them in quite a deep blue, and they work fantastically for the wildlife. So if you smell, it's beautiful. It's like a soft mint smell, but maybe with a touch of licorice. And this works really well in drinks, makes a fantastic tea. Also, they tell me that it's good for hangovers. Obviously, I wouldn't know that, would I? This will clump up really nicely. Give me that scent and that wonderful leaf that we can use in a tea. There's just some bits and pieces I've got to do at the other end of the gravel garden. It's quite nice actually just to see this area from above. This is the other end of the gravel garden. I tend to put a seat back in here. I'm now going to be really honest. I think when I created this garden, I got a little bit carried away at the garden centre. I brought home too much stuff and I've planted things too close together. So what I'm going to do in this space is start to build the whole thing off this phlomis, because this is a beautiful shrub. The problem is the shape is not great. So I'm actually going to reduce it by about 1/3 to start with. And I know we're only in early April and there is still a chance of a frost, but I'll keep an eye on the weather. And by doing that, if I know, you know, look, we're going to have a cold snap, I'll fleece this over. Actually, phloem moss are a really good group of plants. They work right through from herbaceous perennials that will die back to the ground every year to shrubs. And rich, sort of really strong yellows through pinks to purpley colours. And the foliage, it's got a really nice feel to it. I'm using this opportunity not just to reshape, but cut out anything that's dead or damaged. You know, and I think that's the principle of pruning. 3 Ds, remember, dead, diseased and damaged. I think that looks all right, doesn't it? Gives me something to build off now. If I need to come back in through the summer and do a little bit more pruning, I will do. See that behind me? Amelanchier, which is probably my go-to small garden tree. Just about to burst. And we look forward to that in our gardens, don't we? That spring blossom. But what about when you go out into the landscape and you see it en masse? It can be incredible. And Francis was lucky enough last year to go to Cumbria to do exactly that.
Usually it's apple blossom or a cherry tree in full bloom that stops us in our tracks. But the damson blossom spectacle of the Lythe Valley in Westmoreland is truly a sight to behold. Everywhere you look in the valley, there are farms with damson orchards. They were once a source of significant income for the region's farmers. During the war years, damsons were in huge demand for making jam. Then a price crash ruined the market and the crop fell into steep decline. But thanks to the efforts of the Westmoreland Damson Association, in the 1990s, these orchards and damson blossom spectacle were brought back from the brink. One of those responsible for helping to preserve the damson orchards of the area is Hartley Trotter. He nurtures 150 trees on the 3 acres of orchards that have been in his family for 3 generations. So Hartley, damsons have a bit of a reputation for being quite slow to crop. As the saying, he who plants a plum plants for his son, and he who plants a damson plants for his grandson. Is that fair?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because to get damson producing any quantity, you know, you're talking about 20 years or... Really? And they're best probably at the 50 years after they've been planted.
Really?
There are a lot of gardeners now that are growing. At our damson day, we can sell suckers, nearly more suckers than we can find. Really? Yeah, people from all over are taking damson suckers to plant in the gardens. And then they're coming back a year or 2 later and saying, you know those damson suckers I bought? I've never had any damsons yet. Well, I say, well, you've got to wait.
So how old are these trees around here?
Well, these behind us here are about 60.
Really? And so you're getting a good crop from them now?
Yeah.
Damson growing has gone back in your family for generations, hasn't it?
Yeah. My great-grandfather was born just below where we're standing now.
So how old were you when you first sort of went to market with the damsons?
I think the first damson I would pick, I would be 8-year-old, and my dad used to give me a few pennies pocket money for picking damsons.
So why do you think the damsons sort of lost favour in Britain?
Economics. I mean, you could make more money doing other things like producing milk or sheep or than picking damsons. If you went back 50 or 60 years, you couldn't believe how white this valley looked.
Really?
No.
Like many of the fruits that we eat, apples, pears, cherries, damsons are in the rose family. And you can tell a rose flower by having 5 petals, 5 sepals, lots of stamen and one single stigma. And this is a subfamily called amygdaloideae, which is the drupes, which is a fleshy fruit with one single stone. They tend to flower on bare stems, so you can see all this blossom and the leaves haven't yet opened. Just down the road from Hartley's orchard is Flodder Hall, the farm of fellow damson grower Edward Sharp. He's part of the next generation ensuring the survival of the damson orchard and looking at new ways to use the crop. So how do the damsons fit into your farming year?
Well, yes, we always know at the end of August, beginning of September, that we try and leave a bit of time for the damsons. Picking's the only real busy time we have with them. All other works can be fitted in.
Who are you selling most of your damsons to?
We sell quite a lot to a ketchup maker, mixed damson ketchup.
Oh, wow, what's that like?
It's very good, to be fair, yeah. And, you know, various people that sell to the hotels, jam makers, the ice creams,
really?
The gins, you know, everything. It is it's a unique taste, hopefully.
What do you think, as the next generation of passing on this damson heritage, do you think it has a big future?
Yeah, I hope so. And now the fruit's been seen as a useful commodity, it should have a good future, yes.
Thanks to all the hard work of Hartley, Edward and other members of the Westmoreland Damson Association, these damsons are no longer in distress. Hopefully, future generations will continue this work and ensure that this spectacular sight and taste is here for us all to enjoy. And speaking of which, I have some damson fruit cheese and some damson gin. So I am happy as Larry.
I thought that valley was absolutely stunning. The way that the blossom sat against the stone, I thought it worked wonderfully. Last year, I was tying up these blackberries, which is thornless, on the back wall. So hopefully we're getting into June time, July, these will start to fruit and provide for the house. And this border really is about slightly more unusual edibles. We've got things like quince. In here, I've got a myrtle, and that works well in stews instead of bay. So what I want to do is just keep evolving it, keep changing. A few things have died away, and I think that there's some height missing in the back here, and I've got an answer for that. But down the front of it, I want to deal with first. So here, I just want to add a few strawberries. I've already got alpine strawberries that seed around, but I'm going to put this in, which is a classic, really, in a way. It's Cambridge favourite. It's just a good working strawberry, and it'll cover this ground nicely. And then as it develops, I'll start to propagate from the runners and just maybe keep moving it around the border. I don't think there's much better than strawberries and cream from your own garden. Nice sunny position, well drained, but you don't need a garden to grow strawberries. It could be in a hanging basket, it could be in a container. If you don't fancy strawberries, you can also grow blueberries in a pot. And you should still be able to buy these and many other plants online. So there you go. I've got 5 little strawberries. What I do as they fruit, I'll start just to work the straw under, keep the fruit off the ground. So the next thing I want to do is just add some height. Well, what I'm going to use here is a lovely raspberry, and it's called Glencoe, bred in Scotland. I'm going to use it for 2 reasons. One is it's lovely and vertical, but the second is the fruit is purple. So for this board of slightly more unusuals, it's just going to be that little element of surprise. I'm going to put a little bit of manure in there, but you can use compost. I don't always, but this was one of the borders that the soil wasn't great. So I think for this raspberry, just want to put a little bit more organic matter in there. But for a special little treat and something a bit different in this border, I think this Glencoe deserves a go. Can you hear that? Birds singing. Is that not the representation of spring? What about when it comes to flowers? Have you got a favourite? Because I know I have. And it's primrose. It takes me back instantly to time in Devon and watching them grow out of the banks. And Carol went to celebrate them.
I've come to Cornwall, to the only Plant Heritage National Collection of double primroses in the country. Primroses belong to the Primulaceae family. It's a huge genus spread across the Northern Hemisphere. Everything from auriculas from the Alps to those glorious candelabras from Asia. This is a favourite of mine. It's Mary Cruz. This is a primrose which has played a really interesting part in the whole development of double primroses. Florence Bellis, who is the most important hybridist of primroses and whose nursery Barnhaven became synonymous with the breeding of modern varieties, used this to create a lot of the modern doubles that many of us grow in our gardens today. Just look at that. Isn't she beautiful? Primroses love cool, damp banks, glades and hedgerows. They're tremendously successful woodland plants, having evolved side by side with trees. Now, another reason why primroses are such a success story is that 57 million years ago, they actually developed into two separate forms. One's called thrumide and one's called pinnide. Here's a thrumide. Here are all the anthers arranged around the top. And deep down, right in the heart of the flower, is the actual stigma, the female bit. Whereas, in the pinnide, here is the stigma, actually protruding from the flower. But there are the anthers, full of pollen. These are the male bits which will pollinate the other flowers. And the whole idea of this is that you're much more liable to get cross-pollination, so the resultant plants from those are going to be much, much stronger. If you want to try and create your own primrose hybrids, you can use a very simple method. So I'm going to move some pollen from this thrumide one, and I'm going to move it right over to this pinnide one. A nice fresh flower, that one's ideal. And I'm just going to daub it over the top of that stigma. That should do it. That pollen will go right down the pollen tube into the ovary behind the flower, and eventually that will swell and be full of seeds. It's a really great idea with all your primroses to dig them up and divide them every couple of years or so. It reinvigorates them. Normally, when you were doing this, you'd probably do it, as Miss Jekyll said, when the flowers are on the wane. Well, this one isn't flowering, but it's a great time, although the soil's rather soggy. Look at these fabulous roots, but you can tell this plant is almost separating itself. And I dare say we can make, what, maybe as many as 10 out of this one plant. And now, all we've got to do is trim these roots. You want about the sort of length of your palm, that's about 4 inches, 10 centimetres, and just take a sharp knife and trim them across. It looks a bit brutal, but it actually encourages that little plant to make fine, fibrous feeding roots when it gets into the soil, and that's what you want. And when you plant them, Try and plant them like this so that you'll achieve this same kind of lovely sort of arrangement. I think that looks really beautiful. And with a bit of luck, by this time next year, these primulas will do exactly the same. There used to be lots of varieties of double primroses, but one of the few remaining ones is Bonaccord Purple. It's truly strong, robust, and utterly gorgeous. For me, primroses are the epitome of spring. They really are the stars of April.
I couldn't agree with Carol more. As I said, I do love a primrose and that celebration of spring. But for me at the moment, it's this euphorbia. Every time I walk around the front of the house, it's just singing. Look at the colour. But it's not just the flowers. Look at the wildlife that's coming in and using that plant. I've already got a big smile on my face. Easter is traditionally that time of year when you start getting your potatoes in the ground. And it's probably one of the easiest veggies you can grow. They fall into three main groups. So you've got your first earlies, your second earlies, and then your main crop. You'll read a book or you'll look online and it maybe tell you to plant your first earlies, you know, midway through March, your main crops midway through April. But actually, in reality, it's about understanding your soil. And if your soil is really wet and cold, back off, don't get them in. But these are ultimately my first earlies, so these will be the first potatoes that I put in the ground. So the first thing I'm going to do is just dig a trench. So as far as depth of trench, I tend to go about 8 inches. You'll see later on when I'm filling them in the reason why I do it. As I said, these are an easy crop to grow, but you don't even need a garden. If you've got a balcony, you could put them in a bag, in a pot. Just make sure that if you're putting them in a bag, there's a couple of little holes in the bottom so they can drain. And it's a bag that the light can't get through to the potatoes. You'll find other people maybe put manure in their trench. I tend to just use chicken pellets and I just throw some through the bottom. Potatoes are grown from special seed potatoes. They are just like the potatoes you buy in the supermarket, but they are guaranteed to be free from disease. You might see here, look, that they've got little growths coming out the top of them. Well, this is because I've actually chitted the potatoes. Not chipped, all right? Chitted. We'll chip them later. And to do that, you put them in egg boxes, put them in a light windowsill, and you'll get these shoots. But that said, if you can't chip your potatoes, it is not the end of the world. And especially when you get to main crop potatoes, it really doesn't matter. These are red Duke of York potatoes, so an old heritage potato that on this soil tastes awesome. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put these about 1 foot apart with those lovely little chits pointing upwards. As you get into the main crops, that foot turns into about 1.5 feet because the potato's going to have more time in the ground and you're going to end up, you know, with larger potatoes. A lot of the early crops, they ultimately are new potatoes, so they're smaller, so they don't need so much room. What I'll do between the rows is I'll leave about 2 foot with the earlies. I get onto the main crops, I'll probably leave about 3 foot. And the next thing is just to start filling the trench. But all I'm going to do at this point is put about 4 inches on top. So I'm going to leave some of the soil and not fill the trench all the way in. What'll happen now is hopefully those potatoes will start to grow away. When they get about 4 inches out the ground, I will more or less bury that foliage to the top. and it will grow again, and I'll bury it again. And I'll end up with a ridge that's probably just shy of a foot. The reason I do that is because as the potatoes start to develop, you're keeping the light away from the potatoes, because what you don't want is the light getting in there and the potatoes turning green. But also the last thing is that it will just add to the yield. So in 12, 14, 16 weeks time, I'll have a decent amount of potatoes, even off that little row. So that is another job done, and I am loving it. But here, there's a few more for you for the weekend. Roses are hungry plants, and a lot of the nutrients in your soil may have been washed away over the wet winter. To help give them a boost, I'm scattering a general purpose fertiliser over the border in preparation for the new season. Nothing could be easier than growing a few hardy annuals from seed. Plants like poppies and marigolds will give you a good splash of colour in no time at all. Rake your soil to a fine tilth and mark out the area you want to cover. Scatter the seed over the surface, lightly rake in and cover with a fine layer of soil. If no rain is forecast, give them a light water to settle them in. If you haven't got round to planting out your onion sets yet, it's not too late. Choose a sunny spot and plant in a shallow drill. Remember, pointy end up. I'm leaving about 10 centimetres, 4 inches between each one. But you could go closer than this if you're short of space. Label and keep free of weeds over the coming weeks. Well, that's plenty to be getting on with. But if you're feeling creative, Monty has another job for all you amateur filmmakers out there.
Hello. We're all spending a lot more time in our gardens in these troubled days. So let's celebrate the good of that and share it. We'd love to see films of what you are growing and getting up to in your garden. And it doesn't have to be a big fancy garden. It could be a window box or even a plant or two on a windowsill. All you need is a smartphone. Keep it simple. You don't need to do anything fancy. And if you want ideas, go to our website and that will give you directions on how to get it to us. And hopefully, we can share the pleasure that we're all having and inspire lots more to get out and garden. And I will share my garden here at Longmeadow with you next week.
Well, that is it from us. You probably got the sense from the programme that I've got a little bit of a dig for victory mentality going on. I want to make sure that I'm providing for the house if I can, but I'm enjoying my gardening. Make sure this weekend you get out there and you do exactly that. But also stop and have a moment. Listen to the birds sing. Watch the sun go down. Just be for that moment. Anyway, look after yourselves. See you soon.